Reminder there of the frustration many of our South African citizens are experiencing under stage 6 load shedding. Now, a reminder that we will be getting into the discussion to the extent of the labor challenges facing the utility at top of 9. We'll have some of the unions as well coming to give clarity on what arrangement is currently in place to get the workers back fixing those power plants. Meanwhile, a survey of more than 3,300 students has found that over 25% of studying professionals felt they were insufficiently prepared for higher education. Also, 43% of the students said they were moderately prepared. The Professional Provident Society, a financial services company targeting graduates, says the government must act with speed to improve the standard of education in South Africa. PPS further warned that students themselves have largely lost faith in the quality of education they receive at university. Joining us now to discuss this state of affairs are PPS Head of Technical Marketing, Motshabi Nomvethe, and the university's South Africa CEO, Professor Ahmed Bawa. Good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight here on In Focus. When we look at those numbers, according to the survey that you conducted, Motshabi, 25% saying they are insufficiently prepared for higher education, 43% moderately prepared. But the big one is, of course, the standard of higher education offered by South African universities itself compared to international universities. A large number of those who were asked feeling not so confident. Now, quality is highly contested, I believe, in the higher education space as a concept, and has multiple meanings to different people who conceive higher education and quality differently. How do you think the respondents consider that particular fact? How do they think about education quality?
Thank you, Thabo, for having me on your show. I think if we look at this from a student perspective, bearing in mind that the research was conducted amongst our students and across all universities across the country. And we had a good representation, and demographically as well, we had a very good representation from our students. I think this really is the voice of the current students at university. When we look at them and what they define as quality education, the first thing that comes to mind is access to education. Most of these kids who make it into tertiary, they find themselves amongst the very lucky few who actually are given that opportunity. That's one of the things. Equity. I mean, once you get to university, we always say that tertiary especially is a leveler. Some kids might have gone to private schools, some kids might have gone to no-fee paying schools where kids are given meals, etc. When you get to tertiary, that is the equalizer. Everybody is now suddenly treated evenly. Now the ones who come from those disadvantaged communities, for example, they now see the difference in, hey, the guys who come from different backgrounds from me, they might be advanced or better equipped and skilled in certain things that they never had access to because they really just worried about survival and just getting through matric. So that's something to look at. But the most sticky one, especially for our students in the current environment, is what are the outputs? Once they are done with their studies, are they able to look after themselves? Are they able to find employment, or are they able to create the opportunities for themselves? Yeah. And that is a big sticky issue for them. Looking at our employment stats, or unemployment stats more specifically, and especially amongst the youth, yeah, that is definitely one of the things that is top of mind that makes them question them, that if I went to tertiary, I've done all that I'm supposed to do, and I'm still not able to be employable or to create opportunities for myself, then there's not questioning the quality of the education that they're receiving.
So they believe there should be a direct relationship between the input and the output.
It's one of the things, yeah, most definitely. And I think with us also from a corporate perspective, when you look at the output, so these poor students go through university, and we look at the output and what the job market requires, there is a disconnect there.
Yeah. Let's bring you in here then, Ahmed. I mean, when you listen to that, maybe I suppose it brings a little bit of clarity to you exactly what is being spoken about here as far as quality is concerned. When you look at the variety of indicators that speak to quality of our institutions of higher learning, do you feel that the material that is conveyed, whether be it in the reading, the lectures, and so on and so forth, is relevant to the lives of the students? Does it contribute to the ultimate goal?
So let me begin by saying that I think the issues that Mr. Nomvethe has raised are critical issues. I mean, just the issue around access, equity, and so on. And universities are meant to be kind of major engines for social mobility and so on. But we do know, in fact, that that there are serious challenges, and part of the challenge is simply the following: that only 60% of our students actually complete a degree or a qualification. So that's an indication that there's that not everything is hunky-dory, not everything is sort of functioning optimally, if you like. But I think that we have to keep certain things in mind. I mean, the one is that the universities don't create jobs. The last major survey that was done, which a study that was published in about 2016. Done at the University of Stellenbosch, indicated that the unemployment rate of graduates was about 6.2%, which is way lower than the kind of the official unemployment rate. So I think what we are seeing is a combination of two things. The one is, the impact of the downturn, 2008, 2009, that recession, and the impact that had on the economy, and then of course COVID-19. And I think that what we are seeing from around the world, in fact, is just a disillusionment with higher education, because young people who are graduating during this period simply not walking into jobs in the way that they used to in the past. Yeah. So I was at a meeting just last week where U.S. scholars were bemoaning the fact that students have returned to campus and almost immediately, after a very short time, left campus without completing any qualifications. Yeah. So that's the one issue, I think. There's a second set of issues, and that has to do with what you point out to, which is just this idea that there should be much higher levels of preparedness, if you like, for the economy. So, for example, why are we importing so many people to work in the IT industry? Now, of course, a part of that is that a part of that story is that employers in South Africa are really looking for ready-made kind of engineers and so on who can enter jobs, and are happy to kind of import people from other parts of the world for that. Yeah. But that's not the full answer. I mean, the full answer, there's also another part to that answer, at least, and that has to do with, whether we're kind of filling, our intake into universities with the kinds of students that will take up challenges in the IT departments. And
that for me is the aspect that I'm particularly interested in, Ahmed. Let's talk about this. Have we heavily concentrated on the graduation rates and the attainment levels, and we have ignored that the student, the amount that they are learning at universities may have declined over the years?
Yeah, so I'm not overly concerned about that at this stage. I have to be honest with you. I think that the quality of our education is still good, and the way to kind of measure that, is that our students are readily kind of grabbed by universities in other parts of the world for postgraduate studies and so on. Many young people are working in other parts of the world, so I think that the quality of our education is still sufficiently good. I think there might be a mismatch between what our economy needs and what our universities are producing. So I want to make 2 points, right? The one is that, the number of students that are entering our university system with, let's just say, with mathematics at a decent level to enter into programs is way too small for us to make the kinds of inroads that we want to make. So that's one side of it. It's the articulation between school education and higher education. And I think from what I've heard from Mr. Nomvethe, I mean, I think your report speaks to that to some extent. Yeah. There's a second issue, I think, which is the need for much stronger articulation between university education and the world of work. That there needs to be much closer collaboration, if you like, between industry and universities in producing graduates who are work ready. universities can't do that by themselves because universities are not industry.
Yeah.
So, so our challenge is really to work with industry to provide the opportunities for students to be work ready, if you like.
Yeah.
I'll stop there for the time being.
Motshabi, do you feel that message is conveyed enough? Well, I suppose from the university side, they believe they are. But, when you hear employers complain that many of the graduates that they hire are deficient, for example, in basic writing skills, in problem-solving skills, in critical thinking skills, is there a talking in between these two players here, and the students being in the middle?
Yeah. And I think I have to, if I may, I have to agree fully with the professor there that the first thing we need to look at, and I agree with him, that universities don't create employment. So we need to look at the entire value chain, and that value chain starts long before university. Things like writing skills. We need to be looking at how our primary students are reading and writing. And there's research that's done, at least tests that are done, I think at grade 6 and grade 3, if I remember correctly, or grade 3 and 4, something like that. But those are national stats. And if you follow those stats, they are frightening. Where you find, the last time I read the research, we had stats showing that kids as early as grade 3, grade 2, don't even know how to hold a book the right way around when they read. So they're holding it upside down because reading is not something that they do. So then we can't expect that child to go then through to secondary and then to tertiary and then be okay. So we need to really reverse this whole process, and rather than looking at just output at matric level into tertiary and then post-tertiary, or at least out of tertiary, we really need to be going back to the basics, which is from grade 0, grade R, grade 0, and all the way up. That's one of the building blocks. The second thing that the Prof mentioned, which is also very true, is subject choice. Most importantly, I think we tend to leave subject choice, and also I think students in high school don't get enough guidance about the correct subject choices, looking into obviously what are they good at, what are they interested in, etc., but also linking it to what does the economy need, and then getting so that they choose their subject choices. And remember, that requires a whole lot of guidance, and that guidance is not just from parents, not just from teachers. That guidance has to come from industries saying, well, for us, the careers of the future are going to require X, Y, and Z. And then we need to take that responsibility, take it into the schools to educate and help and guide our students, because they make subject choices in grade 10. In grade 10, or at least in grade 9 for grade 10, you're 15 years old at that age, and now you have to make this massive career decision with little or no guidance. So there's definitely a huge place that we can play as an industry, and like I say, as society as a whole, where we help students to make those right choices, because the worst thing that can happen as well is, and then also obviously just looking at our basic education and what are the required pass marks. Because I think that's also one of the huge things that come out at university, where now if you're used to just cruising along and just floating, suddenly it's a rude awakening when you get to tertiary, and those, what used to be a pass mark or even a distinction in secondary, is treated completely different to just a 50% in university and how you attain that. So those are some of the things that we can do, and I think almost immediately, to try and fix and help students to be better prepared.
Head of Technical Marketing at PPS, Nomvethe, staying on with us. We also have the CEO of University South Africa, Professor Ahmed Bawa. We'll get into more of those intricacies. What are the long-term enhancement drivers that we need to be looking at, and what approach do we take in incorporating those? Is it the bottom-up approach, the top-down approach? In other words, where is this input going to be coming from the universities themselves, or maybe even the educators themselves would need to be contributing there? What do you think are those drivers to, I suppose, this disjoint in what students feel they are getting at universities, and how then that translates into them adding value into the economy, into society? You can let us in on that 072 110 5584. We'll get your views on that in a moment. Back tonight on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405. Thanks for staying on. Conversation continues. Then we have the PPS Head of Technical Marketing, Motshabi Nomvethe, and University South Africa CEO, Professor Ahmed Bawa. And we're taking your views and your thoughts tonight on the concerns being raised by PPS on the quality of our higher education. What are your thoughts? What's your perception of the quality that comes out of our institutions of higher learning? Prof, let's talk then about what drives long-term enhancement of the programs that we are offering. What approach do we take in terms of the initiatives that deal with the quality of our programs? Do we look at the top-down approach? The institutions themselves and the leadership of the institutions are the ones who are bringing input, a bottom-up approach, initiatives that are led by educators, maybe by society, maybe by industry as well?
Yeah, I think it has to be a combination, of various factors. I mean, so just let me give you one example. We were approached by SAICA recently, South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, about the fact that they were concerned about exactly what you mentioned, problem-solving skills and so on of the graduates that were entering into their professional qualifications. And so, so that was very helpful to us, because what it did was provided us with a basis then of working with them to begin to understand what needed to change in the curriculum and so on, and how to enhance, the quality of those skills that were required by chartered accountants, when they graduate, when they complete their professional studies. So that's one example of creating the avenues for collaboration between industry and the universities. And I should just mention that our professional qualifications, all of them, are sort of, go through 3 levels of accreditation. On the one hand, the university senates have to approve them. Then they go to the center, the Council for Higher Education for academic accreditation, and then they go to the professional bodies for professional accreditation. So there's multiple kind of levels of engagement, if you like, there. And I think that's the one aspect I think that we need to focus on and work hard to create the opportunities for better collaboration there. There's a second set of issues which has to do with universities understanding that there are vast changes taking place in the labor market now, and coming to grips with what the implications of those changes are for the curriculum. So that's a second set, and the universities are all working with that and trying to understand, with industry, trying to understand. Let me give you an example. In the old days, when I say old days, I mean 5-6 years ago, it would have been unthinkable for us to require every single student, to learn how to engage in programming, say in engineering qualification. Now it's a complete necessity. The students have to learn how to program. It becomes a necessary part of their curriculum. So that those kinds of changes are taking place, and I think that the big challenge for us is to understand, what happens to those qualifications which are going to be heavily impacted by these, by artificial intelligence and so on. So, for example, we are seeing those changes in the banking sector now.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to sort of really gear ourselves to make sure that students that are entering the banking sector are actually geared with those technologies.
Right. Prof, while you speak on those qualifications and the comparison on the students and what they are geared to do, how much on average, right, do you students in a university or in a program, do you measure how they perform above other students in other institutions that serve similar students in a similar program? So in other words, how do you compare among the institutions to say, this is a group of students doing this particular program, they are performing at this level, there are similar circumstances, students at this institution performing at this particular level? Because part of the PPS comparison here, I believe, is also whether or not our programs are on par with international universities, so to speak.
So that is a really critical question, right? I mean, and as I mentioned earlier, we don't have very much difficulty with having our students taken on by institutions in other parts of the world to do postgraduate studies. Where students have that opportunity, students are taken on. So that's a very good sign, right? Now that doesn't mean, of course, that that our students are performing at the best levels and so on. So I'm not suggesting that that's a very good benchmark, but it is an important benchmark, if you like. But there's a second issue which is much more complex, I think, and that is is trying to understand whether graduates from our different universities in our country are being employed at the same level. And now that's, of course, a much more tricky, a much more difficult kind of analysis to do. In fact, we're engaging in a study now that will point some light on that. And I think the big challenge for us is to try and ensure that that there is a certain level of equality, if you like, between programs offered at the different universities.
Yeah.
And of course, there are historical issues there.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I think there's also a lot of, what should I say, prejudice, I would say, in the labor market, in industry, about students who are employed. If a student comes from, University of Cape Town and another one comes from another university, then, there's a certain kind of prejudice to that. Now, I'm not suggesting that, UCT students shouldn't be preferred and so on. So I'm not suggesting that. But, I think the bottom line is that students have to be gauged on an individual basis, if you like. I mean, that they should be seen not so much from which university they come from, but what they have achieved, if you like that.
Right.
So, so I think there's a combination of factors there.
Yeah. Motshabi, reflect on that. I don't know whether you are able to ascertain, I mean, that degree of employability between graduates. I had a conversation, I think, with the Deputy Minister of Higher Education saying chances of employment of graduates in the country are proving to be higher. Yes, there are graduates who are unemployed, but if a student has gone through an institution of higher learning and is a graduate, the chances that somewhere along the line they will certainly get hired. But is there a degree in terms of graduates of who gets hired, who doesn't?
Look, I don't have the stats on the graduate unemployment stats are definitely better than the general youth unemployment stats. But having said that, again with the student lens on, it is incredibly discouraging to know that you've put in the effort, you've put in the hours, you've put in the work, and you could possibly find yourself without a job. And there's many examples. And even we find that even in the STEM, we promoting a lot of STEM subjects, but even people who finish with STEM, who complete studies in STEM, in the STEM field, they find themselves unemployed. It might be for a shorter time, it might be just for a short period, but the point is highly discouraging, and that is what the students are concerned about. On Prof's point about how then the labor market reacts to students who are now finished or who have gone through tertiary, it goes back to my first point of equity. What students are looking for is equity. And if there is a feeling that not all people are treated the same, and it's a question of is it how the other campuses are resourced, for example, compared to others, and a whole lot of other factors. So there is those historical issues which we all can play a role in trying to fix, so that, like I say, when they leave, they're all on equal footing. Their backgrounds we can't change, not too much can be done about for them at that point. But when they leave with the same degree in hand from different institutions, they should really be able to say, we are now on equal footing and we have equal opportunities. And that is where I think we can, as a community, as organizations, and definitely as government, we can play a role. Some of the things, when lockdown, for example, hit, one of the things that a lot of companies did, that PPS did as well, is, for example, giving those students access to online learning, access to laptops and data, because those are some things, some people might take that for granted because I just happen to have a laptop and an iPad and an iPhone and everything else, whereas other students did not have just data to be able to attend class online. So those are some of the quick fixes that I believe we can do. Things like work readiness. No student can ever have enough of work readiness programs. So again, us as institutions, we can come in, we can play a role in, if this is the ideal candidate that we're looking for, the output that we are looking for, let us already be investing in those students through their tertiary to help them to be ready, because we can't also just stand on a pedestal and say, well, this is what we want and you better come in very ready, without having put in the work and the effort to help them to get ready. So those are some of the things that we can do. Obviously, bursaries are also quite a thing that we can all do as, or where we can contribute, where there is that student. We all know a student who is so deserving. Academically they are so deserving, but they're just not able to get themselves through tertiary. So us as corporates, again, we need to look at that and say, how do we support those? Because that will help us to get to that point of equity that we need to reach.
Completely out of time. Appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming on. Motshabi, Nomvethe, and Professor Ahmed Bawa. As always, a pleasure to have you on. We continue.